Hey, Matthew,
Yes.
could you put the link for the YouTube into the chat at some point? People will be able
One
to
step
watch it
ahead of you.
afterwards, right?
Yep. I just pasted it in the chat, and I'll be sure to do it again later as more people join. So yeah, it's in there now.
Great, thank you.
A few more people have joined us. So if you're just joining us now, welcome to AFO Café. Feel free to introduce yourself in the chat. And if you're a student, tell us where you're from and how far along you are in your student career. All right, Allison, Rebecca, or Jen, how are we doing on people coming in? Should we get started?
It has slowed down, but I can keep watching it.
Okay. Well, we'll go ahead and get started since this is being recorded and we're a few minutes past the hour. So I want to welcome everyone to today's AFO Cafe. If you're joining us now, please enter your name and if you're a student, what school you're from in the chat panel. And that way we get an idea of where folks are joining us from. As you are joining, please, for now, keep your microphones and cameras off. Later on, we'll have an opportunity to turn those on and ask questions for our panelists. I'm filling in today for Valentina Ferretti, who is AFO's president. She wasn't able to make it today. My name is Matthew Schumar. I am the communications co-chair for the Association of Field Ornithologists. And this is now our fourth or fifth AFO Cafe that we're doing. This is a monthly program, which is an informal science conversation about all things birds. For those of you who are new to AFO, we are a member-based organization that is focused on the study and conservation of birds in their natural habitats. And we actually see ourselves as a bridge between professional and amateur ornithologists with a strong focus on Latin America, with multiple programs, grant programs for students and researchers. Next year, we'll actually be celebrating our 100th anniversary. We started out as the New England Bird Banding Association in 1922. And along with our annual conference, we'll have our 100-year celebration in Plymouth, Massachusetts next October. So please mark that on your calendar now. We're really excited about how that event is shaping up and hopefully you'll join us in person. And we're really excited about the idea of having in-person conferences again. Next month's cafe, our own Rebecca Brassa, who is joining us today with our class, and she's actively involved in the AFO Communications Committee. We'll be presenting with Nicholas about metapopulation foraging behavior in rockhopper penguins. So mark that one on your calendar and hope that you'll join us next month. The AFO Café are sponsored by AVNet Research Supplies, which is our MISNet and banding supplies operation. And with us today, we have Patrick Keenan from AVNet, and love to give Patrick an opportunity to introduce AVNet and tell us about all the great things that they're doing over there.
Thank you, Matt. Yeah, as Matt said, AVNet Research Supplies is AFO's MISNet and field research supply company. AFO has a long history of providing research tools to students and their professors and researchers globally. We view this as part of AFO's mission, and it's been a real great opportunity to enrich research opportunities for students and support AFO. So with this event today, it's great to see so many students joining. And one of the great things about AVNet is that we're also a research, vector and supporter and resource for students to ask questions about the supplies and tools they need, develop budgets, and we're there for students in particular in that process. So I wanted to kind of just mention that we are a great resource in that regard. I don't want to take a lot of time, but know that we are offering essential supplies to researchers globally, and that your support of AVNet goes back to support AFO in its operations and grant programs. I look forward to hearing from some of you, and thanks a lot. This is going to be a great presentation.
Thanks, Patrick. So with that, I guess we'll jump into today's program. So I'll introduce our moderator, Allison Jackson, who is an assistant professor of environmental studies, which is Harvard, and she is chair of AFO's Undergraduate Affairs Committee. We're really excited about this event and panel that she has put together. So with that, I'll turn it over to Allison to introduce our panelists today and dive into the discussion.
All right, hi everybody. So yeah, I'm gonna try to talk as little as possible so our panelists can be the ones who are really sharing their stories here. Part of the reason, and I was really happy when everybody started filling in what colleges they are at or where they graduated from, so keep those coming if you were a late joiner to the chat, is it looks like a lot of people are coming from potentially undergrad only institutions, and we talked about this when our panelists got together, is that sometimes you don't really know what grad school is when you go to an undergraduate only institution. And I teach at one, so I know that my students maybe don't know what they're getting into if they consider grad school. And that's part of the reason we wanted to put this together today. So I'm going to be asking some questions that we came up with as important ones for the panel, but keep your questions coming in the chat. If you have, follow-up questions or something else that you want to know, we will try to get to it. Also, when we get through all of our questions, we'll kind of open it up and you can unmute your mic and ask direct questions to the panelists as well. So welcome everybody. Let's introduce our panelists. Our panelists are just going to give you a little background on themselves, like where they grew up, where they're going to school, what their research is about, and I guess some of our career goals for those who think they have career goals figured out. So let's start with Maria. You're first on my screen.
Hi, everyone. Yes, my name is Maria Costantini. My pronouns are she, her, and I grew up in New Jersey, South Jersey, not far from Cape May. And I went to mostly a predominant undergraduate only undergrad university called Rowan University, where I didn't get really exposed to much research. So I had to kind of catch up after I finished my undergrad because I didn't get any experiences during that time. And now I did my master's after that at Auburn University, working with birds, and then looking at Eastern bluebird behavior. And now I'm at University of Hawaii at Manoa, and I look at diet and microbiome of wild and captive populations of Hawaiian honeycreepers, and with the focus of trying to improve captive conditions. And I went to grad school because I've always had an interest in conservation, and I didn't really know how to get into the conservation field out of undergrad. So I thought a good way to get more exposure and get more experience was to go to graduate school. So that was my original thought when I first started. And my eventual career goals are that I would like to work for a federal agency like the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service or U.S. Geological Service as a biologist for them. Yeah.
Thanks. Next up, Nicole.
Hi, everyone. I'm Nicole. My pronouns are also she, hers. I grew up in Providence, Rhode Island, and then I went to a small undergrad-only liberal arts college south of Boston called Wheaton College. I had the opposite experience. I did a lot of research projects in undergrad, even though it was only a small undergrad-only school. I studied abroad multiple times, and then I graduated in May of 2020. And so now I'm a second-year PhD student in ecology and evolutionary biology at the University of Tennessee, where I study species interaction networks, specifically bird and mammal-mediated seed dispersal, and how those networks change over various gradients. Currently, I'm working a lot with birds and black bears in Southern Appalachia, but in future seasons, I'm hoping to switch to the tropics. I know that I wanted to go to grad school since high school, actually, but I didn't really know how to get there. And because my school was undergrad only, I didn't really know exactly how to apply or what I needed to do to get to grad school until my junior year of undergrad. And then once I realized that it was possible for me to go right into a PhD, I kind of jumped right into it. And then for my career goals, I want to become a professor, which is why I'm at grad school, probably at a liberal arts college like Wheaton, though, instead of an R1.
Awesome, thanks. Ryan, how about you next?
Hi, I'm Ryan, he, him. I grew up sort of all over the place. I was born in California, but my father was in the military, so we bounced around between Europe and the East Coast a lot. And then I joined the military and was in the Pacific Northwest for a while. And then getting out of the military, I wanted to use my GI Bill, and I really loved conservation. But I also, like, grad school sort of formed as an idea for me, like recognizing that I just had so many questions about how conservation is done and what we can do best, that it seemed like going on a research track would be best for me. And then over the course of my grad school, I've really learned to just love teaching. I find it so rewarding and so fulfilling that my career goal is to end up in academia as a professor. But I'm also realistic. That's pretty difficult. And there are a lot of other places I could end up landing that I'd be very happy, just as long as I'm doing conservation and then helping people learn about the environment. I'm at Oregon State University right now, doing a PhD, my last year of my PhD. Fingers crossed, if you're watching, Katie, it's going to be my last year. I did a master's at Humboldt State, where I also did my undergrad. Humboldt State's kind of in the middle. It's not a big research university, but they don't grant PhDs, but they do master's degrees there. And prior to that, I started out at a community college in the Bay Area because I wasn't a great student in high school. And after the military, I was really nervous about whether or not I would be able to succeed at a university. So I went into community college first.
Great, awesome. Yeah, you're going to be done in a year, just you're sure. Karina.
Hello, I'm Karina Sanchez. I am originally from West Valley City, Utah, which is close to the Salt Lake area, which is where I went to college for my undergrad at a small liberal arts college. I think Nicole said she went there to a small one like that too. I'm a first generation student, so I did not know what graduate school was while I was in college at all. I had no idea that research was a career route until probably my junior year in college. I did get to do some research as an undergrad that got me hooked on birds. And now I'm a PhD student. I'm also in my last year, Ryan, hopefully, fingers crossed. And I'm really interested in urban ecosystems. So right now I'm using birds as my system to study noise pollution, light pollution, and landscape changes to see if it affects their reproduction and their behaviors. I'm also really interested in teaching, which is one of the reasons why I went to grad school. Took some time off, did a lot of hands-on research work, and realized how much I enjoyed explaining that research to others, which is why I came to grad school. And I really hope to stay in academia and build a strong undergrad research program at a primarily undergrad institution.
Great. And last but not least, Katie.
Hi everyone, my name's Katie Henson. I go by she, her. I grew up in Southern California and went to undergrad in the area at Cal State Long Beach, where at the time when I joined college, I had a goal to be a high school teacher because I knew I wanted a teaching career, but I didn't know that there were options, realistic options, at least above the K-12 level. I thought that to get a PhD, you had to be some kind of like a super genius or something. I think I really didn't know what it was about or what it took. And I think even at the time, I didn't realize that professors did research on campus. So I kind of had my eyes open to that my first year of college, when I was taking a first year class that they make everybody take. And this program called Build came in and gave a little lecture. And then I applied to that program. It's an NIH funded program to promote diversity in graduate programs. And if not for them, I give everything to that program because I would not have known what graduate school was about. I would not have thought to have a research career. It was a program I was in for 3 years that helped guide me and like, okay, this is what graduate school is. This is what research is like. So yeah, I did not start college thinking I was going to pursue a PhD. And not to mention Cal State Long Beach is a primarily undergrad institution that offers masters, but not PhDs. And it's also a Hispanic serving institution, which is awesome. And now I'm a second year PhD student at Duke. And I chose grad school because, as soon as I found out that you could do research as a career and, I was like, I'm all in. That sounds awesome. Because I've always been really interested in animal behavior. My love for birds came later on in life, but I've always been really interested in animals and biology. So it just seemed like the perfect fit. And I'm currently researching sexual selection, especially looking at patterned plumage, trying to figure out if there's some sort of signaling function there to complex plumage patterns. And my career goal, ideally is to go into academia, but I've also been considering a museum career recently, but, we'll see where life takes me.
Great. Thank you guys so much. So obviously this is a friendly bunch and they're here to help everybody. So if you have a question, don't be afraid to ask it. But I have about 10 questions, 11 questions prepared for this group that we all kind of agreed upon were like the really important ones. And the first one is actually very related to what everybody said, which is, why go to graduate school? What types of jobs can you get with a graduate degree versus just with an undergrad degree? Because it doesn't have to be for anyone. There are many jobs that you can get with an undergrad degree. And a lot of people said they wanted to go in academia, but like, what are some other career options out there? So I think we'll start off with Ryan to answer that question.
Yeah, so I ended up talking with a lot of students about why to go to grad school, good reasons to go to grad school. And I think they're like, 4 out of 5 of us said academia, but there are so many other reasons to go to grad school and do something at the back end. I think there is one bad reason. Sometimes I'll ask people and say, why do you want to go to grad school? I think the only unacceptable answer is, I don't know. If you don't know why you want to go to grad school, it doesn't mean you shouldn't ever go to grad school, but maybe take some more time. One of the best ways I've heard it put is grad school in any sort of ecological field is hard work for low pay to get a job for harder work and slightly more pay. I initially started off on this track wanting to go into, say, a nonprofit conservation organization. And it was only after getting some teaching experience that I really liked the idea of staying in academia. But yeah, that's just sort of my pitch there. If anybody else wants to chime in.
I would say a big reason why you should go to grad school is if you really like your field. I remember in undergrad, I loved learning about ecology and ornithology and mammals and the tropics. And I loved all of my abroad experiences, and I just wanted more of that. And when I was getting ready to graduate, I felt like I wanted to keep learning about that. And so being passionate about what field you want to go into and loving school to an extent, I guess. But loving school and liking your subject is also a really good reason to go.
Yeah, Karina?
Yeah, I just wanted to add to really kind of think about the careers that you're interested in. I worked a lot for wildlife agencies before coming to grad school. I took 4 years off and I just worked. And a big reason for me for going to grad school was I loved doing research and I really enjoyed the teaching aspect, but I really wanted to drive the research questions. I kind of got sick of other people telling me what to do. And I wanted to come up with my own ideas, and I thought I had a lot of ideas. So that was something for me too. I know lots of people that don't go to graduate school or choose between the PhD versus the master's based off of their career goals that are directly tied to government agency stuff. So I think it's really important to kind of think about where you want to potentially end up, because not everything requires a graduate degree.
Maria?
Yeah. I was going to just talk a little bit more about the other kind of careers that are possible besides academia. And so like Karina was saying, that you don't necessarily need to go to grad school for a lot of these. A lot of them, it's either education or experience. So you could you'd be getting a lot of experience throughout the years after your undergrad or whatever, and apply for those positions. But for me, I wanted, kind of also similar to what Karina was saying, I wanted to kind of have more of a role, kind of take design my own project and everything, because I had done a bunch of seasonal ornithology jobs where I was seeing one teeny tiny part of the project. I was collecting the data and passing it off, and I never really got to see what happened to that data. And I really wanted to be there from the start to the end. And that's what I want to do throughout my whole life. And it's possible to do that without going into academia. That's why I'm kind of my hope that I would like to have is a USGS job, because I would like to still be a PI essentially and be the one conducting the research and having people that I'm managing and coming up with questions, etc. So you can still do that outside of academia.
Yeah, Karina?
Yeah, I was going to just talk a little bit more about the other careers that are possible besides academia. And so like Karina was saying, that you don't necessarily need to go to grad school for a lot of these. A lot of them, it's either education or experience. So you could
So Maria, when you say get experience, what do you mean by that? Is that the field jobs that you were talking about?
Yeah, field jobs, or kind of the most important job that I had between my master's and my PhD. It was a field. It was like a permanent field job for a nonprofit, and that was amazing because I did get to see kind of all sides of the research, and I also got invited to working group meetings where I got to put my input in, like, to the discussions with managing the species that we were trying to protect. And it wasn't just the research part, or it wasn't just the like working in the field part. It was actually like all kind of aspects of it. And so that was really helpful as well. But there are other ways to get experience besides just field work. That's just me personally, what I've done mostly, as well as this more long-term field type job that I just mentioned.
Great. Well, this plays in very well to our next question, because you talked about, like, after your master's, you did something, and maybe the reason we have this selected group that a lot of people said they wanted to go into academia was this just happened to be a group of people who were PhD students. So my next question for everyone is, what's the difference between going straight for a PhD, going for a master's first and then a PhD, or just getting a master's? Like, is there any difference in what career goals you could have, the outcomes of that? And does anyone recommend taking time off in between undergrad, in between different grad schools? You know, is time off a good or a bad thing? And Maria, you go first on that one.
Yeah, okay. So I did go from my undergrad straight to a master's, and then I took time off between my master's, a few years, did a bunch of seasonal jobs, and then I did my PhD, or started my PhD. And you know, it's everybody's different. That's probably going to be a big theme here, is everybody's experience are going to be different. But for me, I was very happy that I did not go to a PhD first, because I did not, like I said, I did not have any undergrad research experience. I just had this nebulous idea of what I was interested in. And so for me, a master's was perfect, because I got this experience of conducting my own research. And it was kind of like a little bit of a baby step into how to become a grad student. That was, nobody like talks about that. You don't just go to grad school and know exactly how to be a good grad student. Like, that's a learning curve in itself. So that master's experience was super important for me. But I left it not feeling great about the actual research I did. I was happy with what I learned as far as how to be a grad student, but I didn't like my research. And then I didn't think I was going to do a PhD after that. But it was these seasonal jobs that I did that really gave me a lot of confidence and really helped develop what exactly I was interested in. It wasn't until this job that I got in Hawaii, where it was this permanent field job, that I was like, okay, I can do a PhD. I'm very passionate about this, and I know I'll continue to be passionate for 5+ years, however long it takes me to do a PhD.
Nicole, you want to add something?
Yeah, so I jumped right into my PhD program, like I said, from undergrad. And I think one of the big reasons that I chose to do that was because I had a big research experience with one of my advisors. We actually did some mixed species flock work in Ecuador for a summer. And so I think that doing that research and realizing that this is the path I wanted to go down helped me jump right into my PhD program. And then also I kind of knew that if I had taken time off, maybe I would have not been like in the academic mode that I was in undergrad, like with all my coursework and handling everything at once. So I thought that if I took some time off, maybe I wouldn't want to go, or I would get out of this academia mode. And so I really just wanted to jump right into academia as an undergrad. I also think if you kind of have an idea that you know you want a PhD, some of the advice that I got as an undergrad was go right into a PhD, because if it's not for you, you can always master out or downgrade. But it's harder to go from a master's degree to a PhD if you do get into a program. So that's just my experience, is jumping right into it.
Karina?
Yeah, I took about 4 years off after my undergrad. And like I mentioned earlier, I just worked a whole bunch. And one of the big reasons for me is because I didn't know much about graduate school until the last half of my undergrad time. And so I was not saving money to apply for grad school. So a big piece of that was saving money so that I could take the GRE as many times as I wanted to take it, and then apply for as many schools as I was interested in. So that was something that was pretty important to me. I also wanted to have some stability in case I had to move out of state, which I did, and I needed like first month's, last month's rent if I was going to move again, and all of that really factored into my decision in waiting. And I went back straight to a PhD. I didn't get a master's, kind of like what Nicole was saying. I got the advice that if I know I want to do a PhD eventually, that it's a good place to just start off with a PhD so that you can really build your system that you want to study for that whole time.
Great. Katie?
Yeah, so I just wanted to mention that I actually had a really similar situation to Nicole, where I was really fortunate in my undergrad to have like a diverse array of research experiences, which I think was really important for figuring out what exactly I liked. You know, I worked with different organisms on different questions. So that really helped me narrow down that, you know, first of all, I did want to do research, and that, you know, what exactly that was going to look like. In terms of like taking a gap year, I had like a accidental gap year, I guess, an unintentional one, just by the nature of I graduated undergrad technically a semester late. I took 4.5 years. So I graduated in the fall, and I wasn't going to start grad school till the next fall. So I actually had the plan to do like a summer field job or bird banding internship or something. Seemed like a great thing. But I was kind of struggling to find good opportunities, just because I think it was mentioned in the chat, like they don't pay very well. And, you know, at that point I hadn't lived on my own, and, you know, there were all these things. And then COVID kind of made it easy for me, because then, you know, that happened, and it was like, well, now there's no doing a seasonal summer job at all. So I spent that gap time kind of just on my own. I mean, admittedly, it was a pandemic, so it's like, it wasn't under ideal circumstances, but in hindsight, I actually kind of like that I just had that time, and I didn't try to like work or like do more research before I was gonna have a research career. But I think it's all about, you know, examining like yourself and kind of what you need, how you're feeling after your undergrad. I was personally like getting really tired of school, and I just wanted to start grad school already. So I think I actually needed that break for like a, you know, mental health reason. So it's very individual. There's no right answer, you know, for what to do right after undergrad.
Mm-hmm. And Ryan, you did a master's too. So can you speak to, because we've got, you know, I think all of these are correct answers, you know, like all of these options work, but how, you know, why did you decide to do a master's?
So I went to a wildlife program, so much more management focused than basic research and ecology focused. And the grad programs in this field, a lot of them require master's degrees in order to go on to get a PhD. So I'm at Oregon State, and our wildlife program requires a master's degree. Lots of the other schools I was looking at were similar. You can always get a waiver, like just about anytime you can get a waiver, but there are usually conditions to getting something like that. And if you're kind of not sure which degree to go after or what to start with, one piece of advice is for anybody in this field is to just cruise the job boards regularly and just check out the jobs that interest you, even if you're not qualified for them, looking at things that you might want to end up with somewhere later down on your career, and start looking at the qualifications for those jobs. And if, you know, if all the jobs you're looking at say requires a master's degree, that might be a good indication that you should consider getting a master's degree. Whereas if you see a lot of really cool jobs that want a PhD, you should have that on your radar. And if grad degrees aren't in the equation on a lot of those job postings, then just see how it goes and apply for those jobs after undergrad.
Yeah. I want to do an aside because Grace in the chat asked this great question. It is the question of any field ecologist is, we talked about getting experience, working field jobs, things like that. How did you all make that work financially? Many of them don't pay very well. Is there any advice you have for people besides agreeing that it sucks? Nicole?
For me, all of my experiences in undergrad were funded through my school, actually. So Wheaton has like a bunch of really great programs for paying you to do unpaid internships. They would like supplement money for unpaid internships in the summer. And then there were research grants that you could apply for as an undergrad through the school to have abroad experiences or research experiences. So I took advantage of a lot of the funding from my school specifically. And then that is kind of what helped me get all of my experiences and internships. I never actually got paying anything, so right through Wheaton.
Great. Maria?
Yeah, so it's definitely a financial frustration dealing with finding seasonal work, and a lot of times they don't pay or they like ask you to pay. And for me personally, there maybe were a lot of really cool positions. I was like, I would love to do that, but they didn't pay. And I prioritize more gathering as much experience as possible. And even though it might not be the thing I'm the most interested in doing, I was like, this is a seasonal position and it'll still be good for me to get this experience. So I kind of went after the ones that did pay. And then I also, the way to like, I dealt with like the in-between field jobs and still making money was I actually got certified to be a substitute teacher. And I just like substitute taught between seasonal jobs because you could just work whenever. So I was always getting paid. So there's like little things like that. You can try to like make work between seasonal jobs as well, if you think about it.
Karina, what can you add?
Yeah, that's like one of my biggest like criticisms of this area of study is that we don't get paid well, and that goes for people interested in like zoos and aquariums as well, like husbandry and stuff. Yeah, we don't get paid well. And to be perfectly honest, I lived super low income for 4 years. And that really was it because I wanted to get experience. I could not just volunteer. I paid for school. I worked full-time during undergrad and used my work study hours to do research in the lab that I did research in. So if you are looking for funding or something like that, make sure you look at the AFO's funding resources or local Audubon societies and stuff. Like, you deserve to get paid for the work that you do. Experience is great, but you also should be valued for the work that you're doing. So like, I personally don't hire any undergraduates unless I can pay them, because I want them to value their own work and their efforts, and you all should get paid.
Yeah, I really liked what Maria said about that, you know, I always see those like crazy, you know, African large mammal where you pay to go do this internship. So maybe those more sexy experiences are out of your range, but taking a field job doing veg sampling or something like that maybe isn't your passion, it really, you know, you will get paid and it will get your foot in the door and you'll get that experience. Okay, well, moving on to more financial things, because this was something that we all were kind of struggling with, is that it is a hard field to get into. It's a hard field to support yourself financially while you're in grad school. So when you started this process, did you know that you could get paid to go to grad school? And then how did you particularly fund your grad school? Was it a fellowship, a research assistantship, a TA, something else? So we're going to go around and get everyone to kind of explain how they are supporting themselves as grad students right now. So did you know this, and how are you now currently supporting yourself? Let's just start with Karina.
I did not know until I started looking into grad programs, and my undergraduate advisor gave me the great advice to not go anywhere unless they offer me stipend pay. This is pretty unique to biology and maybe like chemistry, so life sciences and stuff. Not all grad programs come with kind of a package deal of a teaching assistantship or a research assistantship, but in our field, it is expected. And you should not go anywhere unless you get paid. And that was the advice that I got. So currently, well, for the past 4 years, I was on a teaching assistantship, which supported me and waived my tuition at the university. Right now, I'm on a dissertation fellowship that I applied for. So it's from the American Association of University Women, and it's a stipend that pays for my last year, and it's a living cost stipend. So it pays me, it's a $20,000 stipend. It's rocking. It pays me to live for the next year so I can finish my dissertation.
Great. Ryan, how about you?
Yeah, so it wasn't until about my last year of undergrad that I learned you shouldn't pay for grad school in this field. I think so many of our exposures to grad school, things like masters in business administration or going to med school, both those options can be super expensive and you have to pay for them. And typically people that get those degrees end up making a lot more money than we do at the back end of their degrees. So there are lots of funding sources out there. Don't feel rushed into going into a grad program that doesn't pay. There are a lot of programs out there that won't even accept grad students unless they have the funding to support that grad student. That sometimes that's a department or university policy. So look for those programs, be wary. You shouldn't have to be taking out student loans to do grad school. They should be paying you for the work that you're doing in the lab that you go to. And then my own funding has been a mix of federal research funding that puts me on a research assistantship, teaching assistantships where I help teach classes, and I had a fellowship during the first part of my PhD that paid for tuition and living.
Maria, do you want to jump in since you were answering that question about MS too?
Yeah, so I've been funded through my master's and my PhD. I've never had to pay anything to go to grad school. The way this works is if you're on a TAship or an RAship, so research assistantship, a lot of times your tuition will get waived and then they'll give you a living stipend. And I did not notice until the last year of my undergrad, and it was kind of like in a program like this, they told me about it and my mind was blown that I didn't have to pay to go to grad school, and that like solidified my decision. And so I basically, my master's degree, I TA'd the whole time and got paid for that. And then there's also summer TA spots too. So a lot of times TAships technically only go for the school year, but you can apply for a summer TA position to get paid more. And then my PhD, I've been funded as a TAship. And then also there have been times where my advisor has had like extra research money and they've paid for me to be an RA as well. So that was actually, those are usually really ideal because you often don't have to do as much work and you get paid, at least at my university, better than TAships. And then there's also, Karina's mentioned one, but there are all these like other fellowships that you can apply for that maybe aren't fund you for 4 years or et cetera, but maybe a year or so. I did a Smithsonian fellowship where I got funded for, you could get up to funded for a year, but I decided to only do half of a year. And there are other things like I know, like there's all these different types of fellowships that you could apply for.
But did you apply for them all? That's one of the questions. Like there's so many different options of places to apply for fellowships. Like how many did you actually apply to in your career? Maria, did you?
So as far as fellowships, I've only ever applied for the Smithsonian one. The other things that I've gotten paid for, the RAship and the TAship, that just came through my connections at my university. But the fellowship, the only thing I did was the Smithsonian.
Yeah, I think the end is that you're never going to apply for hundreds of grants. You find one that's perfectly suited for you, and that's the one that you apply for. Who hasn't answered this yet? Nicole, how was your funding for grad school?
I'm on a teaching assistantship, so I have to teach a course every semester, which is actually really fun and I like it a lot. But one thing that I will say in relation to what you just said is that because I'm on a TAship and my advisor is relatively new, I don't have any research funding available through my lab. And so to conduct field work, and if I want to go to the tropics next season, I do have to apply for $1 million grant to support that. And so that would be on top of my TAship. So some of the ones that I'm applying for are like the Lewis and Clark grant. I was going to apply for the Nat Geo's Young Explorers, but it's switched since COVID. And so I have a list of just research funding that I'm going to be applying for. I haven't gotten any yet because starting now. And then I'm also going to apply for the NSF GRFP this upcoming semester. And so potentially I could switch from a TAship to a research assistantship in my last 3 years, but we'll see how that goes.
Great, that's a good segue to Katie. Do you want to answer this question for us?
Yeah, so I learned pretty early on that PhD programs at least should be funded in our field, again, through that undergrad research program that I was in. So when I was applying to schools, I definitely took that into consideration. I tried to figure out what they pay and, especially comparing that to like the cost of living of that area. So it's really cool because Duke Bio actually has a first-year fellowship for students. So the first year of my PhD, I didn't have to TA or RA or anything. It was provided to me by the department. And then last year I applied to the GRFP and I got it. And the GRFP is funded through the NSF, National Science Foundation. It's a graduate research fellowship program. And they provide a stipend, I think is going on in the chat. It's important to distinguish research money from stipend money. At the same time that I applied to the GRFP, I was also applying to small research grants. And I think I got 2 out of 3 of them, and I'm still applying to them. But the GRFP funds you for 3 years out of 5. It's still like an extremely sweet deal because it's like $34,000 stipend, and you don't owe anything in terms of like, you don't have to do anything really for them. It's not service-based. You just have to do your research, and it doesn't even have to be the research you propose. In the application, you propose a research project that will last you ideally through your PhD. You write like a personal statement. And, it is extremely competitive. And I'm not going to lie, there is like a proven bias towards Ivy League and Ivy Plus schools. And, it's really horrible. I really wish it wasn't that way. Sometimes I do wonder if I submitted the same application, but with my Cal State Long Beach, affiliation, would I have gotten it instead of Duke? But I think it's still worth, applying. It's like probably one of the best fellowships out there that carries you through your whole PhD. And there's lots of resources out there about it. Lots of people have applied to it before and gotten it. And I'd like to, if I may, share a resource now that we're talking about the GRFP that helped me a lot when I was applying. So for anyone who's applying this year or maybe next year, this is a Google Doc sheet where people from all kinds of fields, including ecology though and life sciences, have put examples of their successful essays and such. And some have even provided their own advice in a separate document, but that helped me a ton, just to look at examples and have anybody who was willing to read my writing, read it and give me feedback. So yeah, there's probably more I could talk about with the GRFP, but I don't know if anyone else wants to say anything.
I think go ahead, Ryan.
Quickly respond to Kelly Hayden. You asked a question about pursuing grad school non-full-time if you're working and your employer will help fund grad school. I think that can be a great option. I've known a lot of people to have done that, especially if, like you say in there, you can mesh the research that you're doing for grad school with your job duties. That seems to work out really well. It tends to prolong your timeline, but if you've got a steady paycheck coming in and you're getting your classes done and you're getting your research done, if you take 3-4 years to get a master's instead of 2 years to get a master's, and who gets a master's in 2 years anyways, I think that's a totally cool idea, and I encourage a lot of people to look into that. There are a lot of employers out there. It might not be obvious at first or when you're applying, but there are lots of opportunities like that out there.
Yeah, so I think the summary of everyone is for ecology, conservation, and ornithology, do not pay for grad school. Get paid to go to grad school. Definitely doctors and lawyers and stuff pay for their grad school. But in our field, you should not be paying, and they should actually be paying you. The stipends aren't great, but it will be enough that you can get a lot of roommates and make it work. So that's kind of the takeaway. But then there's just a million different ways to make it work, none of which are wrong. So yeah, if you're working part-time, if you're, getting a fellowship, getting a TAship, there's so many good options. So let's move on to you decided you want to go to grad school. It's the career choice for you. How did you find and choose a school and an advisor? This was kind of coming up in the chat too. Did you know exactly what you wanted to study when you started this process? Ryan, you want to kick us off?
Yeah, so there's lots of important considerations in grad school, like not paying for it out of your own pocket, and having a good reason to go. But I think once you're aware of those things, choosing who you're going to work with is the most critical decision to grad school, and a very critical decision for the rest of your career. Starting off, when I was thinking about grad school, I know I wanted to go, I thought it was, you go to a good school and they're going to have a good program. And I learned pretty quickly it's about who your advisor is that you're working with. That's important. And there are so many factors that go into it. First, you want to choose somebody who has research interests aligned with what your research interests are. And you might say, I'm really interested in lots of things. How do I narrow that down? One piece of advice is lots of times you have to do reports or small projects in your undergrad. And like the species and the types of questions that you find yourself attracted to in that, and then the types of research papers you find yourself digging up for these undergrad projects, that can be a really good guide to where you should be looking or who you should be looking at working with for potential grad school. But aside from the basics of what you're going to be doing, I think the personality and how you get along with your potential advisor is a really important consideration, but a very difficult thing to address before actually working with that person. I've heard terrible stories. If somebody fails in grad school, oftentimes it's because of big personality conflicts with their advisor. So maybe the biggest piece of advice I can give you is talk to the alumni of the lab, people that have gotten their degrees through that advisor in the past, and talk to current lab members. The alumni can be oftentimes a little more open because that's not their boss anymore, so they don't have to worry as much about things coming back. But if there are any problems with that advisor, then hopefully I would come up, or you'd have some sort of indication with that. There are lots of great professors out there, and I don't mean to scare you that every single professor is terrible, but it can just be a matter of making sure you're a good match for your potential advisor. I've seen the same professor graduate out some of the most successful biologists I know in the field right now, and the same advisor has had plenty of students wash out of their lab. So it's just a matter of finding somebody that you think you're going to be able to work with very well. A lot of times it's a matter of a hands-off, hands-on scale. Some people like a lot of independence in grad school, which can be great, but you're in grad school to learn. So having a hands-on advisor can be really helpful if they're responsive to emails and get you edits back quickly on things and help you apply and write letters of recommendations. That's really what you're there for. I could probably just keep talking all night about this, but I should probably stop and open it up to others so that we can get some other perspectives on it.
Yeah, it's so important. Karina, what do you want to add?
Yeah, I just wanted to add onto that. I agree with everything that Ryan said. When I was looking for advisors, I looked at a lot of job boards. I don't think Ecolog is even around anymore.
Oh, it is. It is.
It is? Okay.
Yes, I know.
Ecolog, yeah, the Ecological Society of America has a listserv that tons of people post availability for or spots in their lab, and that's how I found my lab. But not only was I really interested in doing work on birdsong, which is what my lab does, I'm also really interested in teaching. And so my degree is a biological education PhD. So I knew that I wanted to have some kind of emphasis on pedagogy and teaching. And so finding this program was kind of a dream come true because within the program, I get to do the research that I want to do, but I also get lots of training for a future in academia as a faculty member. So a lot of people say like, it's the advisor, which I absolutely agree. But if you know you want to do research or maybe dip into different types of research, it's also good to consider what other faculty are there in that program that you might be able to link up with.
Nicole, what do you want to add? We also still need to cover like those cold emails that you have to send to advisors. So Nicole, if you want to touch on that too.
That's exactly what I was going to say, actually.
Okay.
I started reaching out. So I don't know if this is the right way to do it, but I was doing the same thing, looking at Texas A&M, job board, Ecolog, and then also just looking into people in the field that were doing research that I was into. And I must have sent like over 50 cold emails to people like different programs, different advisors, just saying, hi, I'm interested in your lab or this position. And then attach my CV and resume, even if they have never heard of me and I had no relationship to them. I would just cold email and say, hi, this is who I am and I'm interested in your lab and applying. Seriously, so many emails. And I wasn't tied to a certain area of the US. Like I said, I'm from around the Boston area in New England. And so I think that helped me out a lot. I was like open to going anywhere in the country. And so I was really applying to different people all around the country and sending emails. And then when I actually found my current advisor, I think we started talking the August before my senior year. So very, very early on, I was establishing relationships with potential people I wanted to work with. And then he actually gave me the email of his past students and said that I should talk to them. And so it was kind of just like a very long process of reaching out to a million people at the beginning and then slowly narrowing it down. And then eventually reaching out to his students and the program. So I recommend looking into as many different options as possible before you choose the right person.
And so it sounds like you started, almost more than a year out. That's one of the questions that came up too. How early did you start those cold emails?
The summer before my senior year. So pretty early.
Yeah. So everyone, it's not too late to be looking at sending those emails now for next fall admission. That's almost the correct timeline at this point.
Yeah. And then my timeline was I was sending emails and then the application was due in late November, early December. And then you get invited, at least my program, you get invited to recruitment weekend and then you hear back in the spring. So it's a very long process.
Katie, what can you add?
So I'll just say my strategy, what I did, I'll argue that it's a little unconventional and maybe not what I'd personally recommend, but it worked well for me that I started with thinking like, where would I not mind living? I actually knew that I wanted to go outside of California. I'd lived in California my whole life and I kind of wanted somewhere seasonal, to be honest. So that's where I started looking places that maybe wouldn't be too expensive to live. Because even though, I ended up getting the GRFP, there was no guarantee that I was going to get it. So I wanted to make sure whatever stipend I was getting from the grad program I was joining was going to be sufficient. And as for advisors, I think what other people have mentioned is really good, looking at research that already exists in the field. I went to 2 national conferences as an undergrad, and that was really helpful because I think I actually might win in terms of like how early did you reach out to potential advisors. I think I first reached out like my sophomore year or something to potential advisors, because like I remember there was one who I ended up getting into his lab but choosing to come here to Duke instead. But I said like, hey, I'm really interested in your research. It's really cool. Like, are you going to be at this upcoming conference? And we actually, I think, met up there, or I met with one of his grad students. So I think conferences can be, a really good way to connect with at least people's grad students, get an idea, talk to them there, what the advisor's like, and what research is like in that lab. But ultimately, it's a really complex decision, a combination of all kinds of things. It's like a personality fit with your advisor, and there's pros and cons to choosing an advisor who's, let's say, more early career versus one who's really like senior in their career. So it's all just thinking about what you're looking for, what kind of person you are. And in terms of what I wanted to study, I was really flexible. I think you shouldn't be like too stuck with like, this is the exact thing I need to study, because I think once you start grad school, your ideas kind of are molding and developing as they should be. So I applied to labs that were like urban ecology, like, just feather, plumage coloration, like, it was kind of across the board. And then it wasn't until that I joined this lab that I really solidified like, okay, this is what I'm interested in. I read a lot more, got a lot more familiar with the field. So I think it's, okay to be a little like flexible when you're thinking of labs that you want to join.
Mm-hmm. Maria.
Okay, yeah, there's a lot of things I could say about this, but I'm going to mostly just talk about when you're reaching out and having these discussions with advisors. I mentioned this, I think, so Holly had asked this question, but any red flags? And for the most part, I feel like it's really dependent on who you are and who the advisor is. You might hear some stuff from some people and be like, oh, this advisor was terrible for me, but they might just not be a good fit for that advisor. And that doesn't mean that advisor is a terrible advisor. So it's like, I wouldn't necessarily just like say like rule this person out for being like, oh, so somebody didn't work well with them. But it is, the relationship that you have with your advisor is very important. I've had as a master's student, as a PhD student, I've had two very different experiences. My master's experience, I did not have a good relationship with my advisor. I did not feel comfortable going to them to talk to them. And I just floundered. I was very lost because I didn't have like a relationship with my master's advisor. And so when I went and applied for my PhD, I was like, I know I need somebody who's going to be there for me and going to support me. And that was more important to me than the actual research they were doing. Because I knew that I could figure stuff out on my own, and I could find other people to be on my committee to fill in other holes. But I knew that I needed a good relationship with my advisor, because I was so like, not to be dramatic, but I was so traumatized from my master's experience that I was like, I need a good advisor who's going to be there. So just think about that when you're talking to people.
Ryan?
Yeah, so quickly on the red flags thing. Hopefully they'll have their CV posted and look at their publication record with their students. Hopefully their students are publishing. That's sort of the end goal of grad school there. Dang, I just had another one. Just again, talking to former lab members. Everybody keeps freezing. Am I freezing? No. Oh man, I'll throw that other bit of advice in the chat if it comes to mind. But the big thing is, looking at where their lab alumni end up. Hopefully they're listing that on their website. If not, try and do some sleuthing to see where their former grad students and postdocs end up. If that's not posted, or they're not really ending up with the careers that they want, that can be a red flag that they might not be getting the support they need during grad school. Whereas if everybody's gainfully employed, doing exactly what they were trained for in grad school, that's a really good indication that that's a a good advisor that's helping their students get to where they want to go.
Definitely. Karina?
Just wanted to quickly add, Katie mentioned this about location being important to them. It was also really important to me too. I'm really close to my family. I wanted to be able to afford to go home every once in a while, but I think this is not something that I asked when I was looking into programs or advisors, that I wish I had asked about the diversity of the department. I didn't ask that. I wish I had also asked about first generation students in the department. I didn't ask that. I wish I had. And I wish I had asked my advisor if they had worked with first generation students. She's been an excellent advisor, but there are like some things that I wish I just knew a little bit beforehand. As a first gen, as a Latina, I chose this area because there were a lot of Hispanic populations in this area that didn't obviously translate to the graduate community here at my university. But if that's important to you and community is important to you, I think it's worth asking.
I'm sorry, I've lost track of the person who asked this in the chat, but I saved it because I wanted to make sure it got asked, which was, how do you go about if you have dependents? If you have, a family to support dependents, how does grad school work there? Can it work? Does anyone have any idea about that?
Yep, I'm married and I have a toddler. It's tough. Everybody's got challenges in grad school. It can be tough for all of us for one reason or another, and it's just a matter of priorities. I know a lot of people who have kids in grad school and then they don't really get engaged on the social aspect of being in their grad program. I feel like my 2-year-old daughter is practically a member of our department because I drag her to just about every single departmental function. In my department, my department head is super supportive of faculty and work-life, or in the families and work-life balance. And my university is pretty supportive of it. You can see what sort of opportunities are offered at the university and ask about that. The advisor you're interested in may not have answers, especially if they don't have children, but you can dig around. So my university has daycare facilities on campus that are half the price of daycare facilities in the community, which is a gigantic benefit. I'm so thankful for it. It makes things so much easier to go through grad school. Again, it's challenging. We all have challenges. Some people, they don't do it. Some people will tell you you're not going to succeed. Don't listen to them. Don't listen to them. You can do it.
Thanks. I'm going to try to combine some of these, but these have been coming up in the chat as well. So can anybody explain what the GRE is? For those who maybe don't understand, we have been using acronyms. What is the GRE? When should you take it? How much does it cost? Are schools still requiring it? It's such a loaded thing right now. Jen mentioned GRE Grexit in the chat. So does anyone want to take that? I don't have a name for that one, actually.
It's awful, but I'll let somebody else go.
Did all of our participants take the GRE? Yeah, so Karina, what's your take on it?
Yeah, I took it twice. I was sick when I first took it. It's a long exam. I don't consider myself to be a good standardized exam taker. But to be honest, my advisor didn't really care about my GRE score. When I was talking to them more and more about joining their lab, I shared like a writing example with them and my CV and stuff. And I think those were the things that really drove my application. I don't know how strict every department is. You are applying to a lab for the most part. I think Ryan said this earlier. Some people won't even accept students unless they're funded, which means that they're going to be going directly into a TA or RA slot in a lab that's allocated to that advisor. And yeah, I think most universities, you have to hit that minimum of whatever scores are. It's been so long since I did, it's been almost like 5 years. But I've heard that many universities are not requiring it anymore.
Yeah, I mean, just to step back even more, like the GRE used to be considered kind of like the SAT or the ACT to get into graduate school. It's the graduate record exam. But you're if you're thinking about grad school right now, you're in the middle of this movement to not use the GRE anymore. It's an expensive standardized test that doesn't really reflect anyone's aptitude in grad school. So Nicole put in the chat there, she didn't have to take it for her program. So that's what it is. The problem is that some places still are making you take it. So some of our panelists took it, some of them didn't. The score doesn't matter, but it maybe matters. I mean, it's very confusing right now for the GRE. Would you guys recommend taking it, students looking into taking it, or what would you recommend?
And the rabble rouser part of me says, don't take it and only apply to schools that don't require the GRE, to send a message to the schools that require the GRE. It's awful. It's a terrible indicator of your success in grad school. The things you have to know for it aren't applicable to anything in life practically. So yeah, I'm just going to get my blood pressure up if I keep talking about the GRE.
Katie, what did you want to add?
So I also hate the GRE. I have a lot of thoughts on it. I think it's like very unfair, very unreasonable. I know that a lot of grad programs don't even like it, but when I applied in 2019, at least, maybe things have radically changed. I applied to 6 schools and only one of them didn't require the GRE. And I think some students might look at that and think like they'll have a better chance at getting into a school that doesn't require the GRE, or it certainly is a strategy to choose like schools that don't require the GRE. But, that was actually one of the schools I didn't get into. So, I mean, it's not like I think a GRE score will like make or break, it shouldn't, at least if it's a good program. It's just more of an obligation, and nobody likes it. But I think, it's complicated. I personally didn't want to risk having a situation where there was a program I was really excited about and an advisor that was a good fit, but the school happens to require the GRE. That was just a risk I didn't want to take. So I took it once and I got mixed advice about whether I should retake it or not. My quantitative score, that's the math, was not necessarily competitive for biology, but I made the personal decision to say, I feel like other parts of my application are pretty strong. And, if a school is really going to reject me because of my GRE, maybe I don't want to go there anyway.
Good. Yeah. Maria.
Just really quick, wanted to say, yeah, if you had the same kind of worry that Katie mentioned about being excluded from a place that you really wanted to go to, and you have the funds to take it, then take it if you want to. But like, if you are hard on money and like this is like a make or break thing for you financially, I wouldn't take it. It's you shouldn't be paying for it. And there might, I don't know, because I haven't been in a situation, but there might be I don't know if like any kind of waivers or anything for students in financial need. I'm not sure, but maybe not.
I haven't heard those because the movement has been to just stop requiring it. I think what everyone's saying is that because some schools are still requiring it, you might take it, most people take it a year still before they're going to grad school, but the scores are good for 4 to 5 years. So if you take it and don't get into grad school in 1 year, you don't have to retake it. You just kind of hold your score over. But it almost is this weird formality where it has to exist in your application packet, but they sometimes don't care what the numbers are. So like, don't make yourself crazy taking it multiple times to get better and better scores. It's messed up. I'm hoping in this generation it will go away as something that doesn't exist. Oh, good. So Rebecca's saying there's waivers through the GRE testing site. So that's great. So we're kind of going to run out of time. We've covered a lot. If there's anybody in like that's listening right now that has a question and wants to ask it live, you can use the little raise hand button in Zoom, and you can unmute and ask the question. If I missed a question that's really pressing that came up in the chat, you can also throw it in the chat right now if we haven't gotten to it. I want to make sure we're asking the questions of the folks who are here, instead of maybe getting to the last of the few that I had on there. So anyone got a question out there burning for these panelists? Well, that's a good question. So, like, do you have ornithology grad schools that you recommend looking into as a jumping off point for someone interested in ornithology in particular? Apparently not.
Yeah, I'll jump in on that and say, again, it's about who you're working with and not the school. Some schools are very heavy in ornithology, and they have a lot of ornithology faculty members. There aren't very many ornithology, yeah, there aren't very many ornithology specific programs out there. But like, I'm in a fisheries and wildlife and conservation sciences department. We have several of the departments on campus here at Oregon State that have ornithologists housed in them. So we have like dozens of ornithologists here, plus federal agencies that take on grad students as well. So again, it's mostly like dig into the literature. If there's a species or a type of question you're interested in working on, see who's publishing in that field right now. And that's a better guide for where you should be going than just looking through department rosters.
Yeah, and I think it's okay to also have some qualifications of what you need. So if you need to be in a certain geographic area, you can focus there. I think that's hard on people. A lot of us have these stories of moving everywhere, but it's okay to say, I'm looking in this area and I'm going to take, the best advisor in that area. Katie, what do you want to add?
Yeah, so I just want to second that. I think trying to go into looking into like labs to join, starting with like, ornithology heavy programs is not the best bet. It's, looking at, let's say, a biology or ecology program faculty page and, seeing who there should be at least one person or two who studies birds. And of course, that can vary in the research subject. It can be like conservation, population genetics, who knows. Personally, what I did was like, if there was a faculty page that, stated names and then a description of their research on the same page, I just like Control F and searched like bird or avian to see if like anyone there was researching birds and, did a deeper look beyond that. But I would say start with like the question that you're interested in is my personal advice for PhD programs, at least, is like, think of what research question interests you and knowing that birds are your preferred system, go from there and see who in like biology, ecology, et cetera programs is studying birds.
Nicole?
I was going to say something very similar to Katie. Specifically in my case, my advisor and I were interested in similar kinds of questions. And his last few students actually worked with ants, and he hadn't worked with birds in a while, but we were interested in the same questions, and I wanted to focus on birds and mammals for my study species, and he was totally open to that. So I would also say that even if it's not like a bird advertised lab, if they have similar questions like conservation issue questions, or for me it was species interactions, you can still reach out to them and just say like, I feel like we have certain aims, but my study system might be a little different, and then see how that works out too.
Oh, this is great. There's so many questions in the chat. I want to get to them all. So yeah, Emily had a really good question. I've been researching advisors and cold emailing with my proposal research interest on my CV for years, and everyone keeps telling me they don't have availability in their labs. It's very frustrating, and I don't know what I'm doing wrong. Help?
I can jump in. I don't know. I can't speak for everybody in this group, but that is a very common situation. I can't tell you how many people I reached out to and how few I heard back from. And it's not anything you're doing wrong. It's just that this is like advisors are so busy, and there's a lot of people reaching out to them. There's like, it's just very difficult. So I don't think you're doing anything wrong. You just need to be persistent, and as frustrating as it is, you just got to keep trying. Like I tried so hard, but you'll get there.
Nicole, what do you want to add?
I was going to say the same thing. Like I said earlier, I cold emailed like over 50 and only heard back from a subsample. I think something that's really helpful is specifically emailing people that have posted on Ecolog or Texas A&M and jobs like that, because then you know for sure that the lab has funding or the program has funding. So it's not necessarily like, oh, we don't have any space. So making sure that you're emailing people that are also advertising positions or programs that are advertising positions.
Yeah, Katie.
I just wanted to say on the point of, reaching out to advisors and, them saying, either maybe like not replying at all or, saying that they don't have the funding. Like, I just say, keep going. It's part of the process and it sucks. I got those emails too, some of them worded nicer than others. But I think it's not necessarily a sign that you're doing something wrong. I just think that there is an advisor out there that you'll connect with, and some good signs to look for is if they want to chat with you, either like a phone call or a Zoom call or whatever. Look for signs like that. I think that's a sign that an advisor is like really personally interested in you. And I would say like consistency as well. Sometimes I reached out to potential advisors multiple times. Like if they didn't respond the first time or maybe the second time, I was a little insistent with people that I thought would be a good match. But definitely try not to get too discouraged, because like I feel like especially with the pandemic, advisors are in a tough place in terms of thinking of how am I going to accept students to my lab? Do I have the funding to do that? Or do I want to accept students under these circumstances? So it's I think right now a very particularly bad time for advisors.
Mm-hmm. I see a participant with their hand up. Alyssa, do you want to unmute and ask your question?
Yes, I do. Thank you. So my question is, so I noticed that a lot of y'all, the panelists, they skipped their master's degree and went straight into their PhD. So I had no idea that you could do that. I was always under the impression that you had to get a master's degree in order to pursue a PhD. So I guess my question is, what are the pros and cons of doing each? Like, why did some of y'all decide to skip the master's degree and go into your PhD? And then why did y'all, those of you who did pursue a master's, why did you do that instead of going straight to your PhD?
Good question. Anyone want to jump in there? Karina, you have your hand up, I think, from last time, but do you have opinions?
Yeah, I'm one of those that skipped the master's. But I did take time off in between, and I think that really solidified my choice to go to a PhD instead of a master's. I knew the system I wanted to work in. I knew the questions I wanted to ask. And to be honest, I just really wanted more than 2 years in the program. And I knew that ultimately I wanted to teach. Like I mentioned like a billion times already, I'm a first generation student, and I really believe that the experience I got as an undergrad doing some research is the reason I got to come to graduate school. And that was why I wanted to go straight to a PhD. I wanted to be in hopefully be in a position that I can increase the population of underserved and minoritized students in STEM specifically. So I had a whole bunch of reasons for why I skipped the master's. I really knew why I wanted to go into academia, and I thought it would be best to just get started because I was 4 years late already.
Katie.
Yeah, so I also went straight to PhD. Some people I think wonder, like, do you have to be some kind of like superstar undergrad to be able to do that? But I've known people who applied to grad programs straight from undergrad that were rejected, people who applied as master's students who were rejected. So it's kind of what you do with those things. So if you're an undergrad and you feel like you've had a lot of great research experiences, maybe even like a publication or research that could be a publication, I know personally, I presented at conferences. I did an NSF REU, which is a National Science Foundation research experiences for undergrads, which was fantastic. Research internships at other universities. Like I mentioned earlier, I had like an array of things to talk about. So that's what made me feel prepared, to apply to a PhD program. But I know that there are instances where, let's say, undergrads don't find out till their last year, like, wait, I'm supposed to do research to get into a PhD program, it's kind of an unspoken rule, which I think is horrible. But, if you feel like you're in a position where you don't have a lot of research experience to talk about, or, maybe you're not entirely sure what graduate level research is like, or what exact kind of field or system you're interested in, that's when I would really recommend a master's. But if you feel like you've done a lot of research in undergrad, you really know what you like, what excites you, what you want to do more of, or maybe less of based on your undergrad research experiences, I would just go straight for the PhD. Because I think for me, for my own personal situation, I think it just would not have been a good use of my time to do a master's first. But for a lot of people, it's like the right decision and extremely beneficial.
Yeah, great. Nicole?
I just saw something in the chat about going straight into a PhD or master's. And I will say, I think it was a great decision for me to go right into a PhD program, because I definitely knew what I wanted, just like Karina. I knew that I wanted to go into academia and I wanted a PhD, and I had those undergrad research experiences that helped me. But I will say, being fresh out of undergrad as a TA in a PhD program and teaching and like living amongst the undergrads is a little bit weird. So maybe taking a year or two off and doing some field work and just growing and getting other experiences could be a good idea for you. But I would say that that's pretty much the only downside, is the weird interactions with undergrads, knowing that we're the same age and I'm their TA.
Yeah, I get that. As we're coming up, we've been here for an hour and a half already. This has gone so fast. I wanted to say that we've been talking a lot about like the experiences you get and networking. We haven't used that word that much, but I want everyone who's still on the call, which there's a bunch of you, you basically have effectively networked by coming to this event, and like you should view all of us as part of your network now. I'm going to put my email in the chat. So we didn't get to everybody's questions necessarily. And so if you have more questions for any of the panelists, if they feel comfortable, they'll put their emails in the chat. Just, in case we didn't cover your personal thing, that it is this like very particular thing for each person. So sometimes you just need another human who's gone through this to bounce ideas off of. And so you've gotten, by coming to this, you've got a whole bunch of people that you could potentially email now to get help with this. And, don't be afraid to reach out. I would love for somebody to just, because we talked about this and we didn't even get to it, what is the imposter syndrome, as we're going to kind of wrap up? It's such a funny thing to end with, but Maria, do you want to?
Yeah, I'm happy to talk about it because I feel very strongly about it. I went through my master's not knowing it existed, and I thought I was the only person who didn't feel like they belonged. So imposter syndrome is like, you think everybody else, like that you don't belong there, and everybody's like you're fooling everybody. Like you're not as smart as everybody like else is around you, all your peers, and you're just somehow sliding through the cracks and like whatever. So, and you just feel like you're never as good. You're kind of a lot of times comparing yourself and like, oh, look how great my peers are doing. And the thing is, a lot of people, I'm not going to say everybody, but a lot of people feel the same way, and we're all viewing each other that way. Like some people like who I am looking at being like, wow, they're so amazing, I nothing compared to them. They could potentially be looking at me and thinking the same thing. So it's this like weird, like bad mental health like situation going on. And so I think it's really important. That's why I like to talk about it, so that we all know that a lot of people are experiencing it. And that's why part of it is really important for stressing about your advisor. You want somebody who doesn't like make that imposter syndrome worse. My master's advisor did do that to me. And then, I mean, like, another great thing about grad school is that there's a lot of mental health resources at your university that are free to you. For, I can't say for every university, I know that a lot of them are that. So like, take advantage of them too, and don't be like ashamed and feel like you're different.
Yeah, I think that was such a good summary. Thank you, Maria, because it's totally true. It is a defined psychological thing that if you Google it, it will sound, you'll be like, oh no, but I'm the only one who experiences this because I am dumber than everyone else. No, it's not true. And so we've put all of our emails in the chat if you need kind of that pep talk every once in a while. Find yourself the network wherever you end up that gives you that pep talk every once in a while that you're not the imposter in this. I don't mind sticking around for a little bit longer, but if people have to go, thank you so much for being here and listening. And we'll stick around if anyone's got a particular question that's burning that they want to answer. Thank you, everybody, so much. And thank you to all the panelists as well. You guys, A+, wonderful job. Thank you so much. Yeah, everybody just wants to start their Friday, maybe.